The UN estimates that by 2050 there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish.
It's estimated that 100 million tons of plastic are generated globally each year.
Local authorities have been forced to close beaches due to mounds of plastic rubbish.
Hello, I'm Tammy Dange, an executive turned social entrepreneur. It's clear that Mother Nature has a plastics problem, but I think it's time to quit talking about the problem. Instead, let's talk about the solutions. This is a business podcast with an environmental mission. And as your host of the Plastics Revolution, I'm going to chat with the innovators, change makers, and fellow entrepreneurs who are leading the way in fighting plastic waste. Along the way, we'll also share tips and practical ideas so that you too can be part of the solution. This is the Plastics Revolution. Today's guest is Luise Grossman. She's a surfer, marketer, and the co-founder of a sustainable surf product company called 5 Oceans. In 2013, Luise and her life partner, Felix Wunner, decided to start a movement of sorts by trying to make the surf product industry more sustainable. In fact, she explained to me the contradiction between the mindset of a surfer and the lack of sustainability in most of the products they use for their own sport. 5 Oceans' first product was called Ecofin, a surfboard fin made from recycled plastic collected in Bali. Specifically, a set of Ecofins is actually made from 100 recycled bottle caps. In this episode, we'll talk about how they came up with their idea, how they funded the manufacturing through crowdfunding, and ultimately the impact that they already made and want to make moving forward. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Plastics Revolution with Luise Grossman of 5 Oceans. Luise, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I was looking for a manufacturer for my own products, and I found your case study about what you did to create your first product, Ecofin. And that's essentially how I found my own manufacturer. The owner of that company suggested I give you guys a call for my podcast, and that's how we ended up on the line. So, Luise, thank you for coming on today. I'd love to know more about yourself and your co-founder, Felix. Would you mind talking about that and also how you ended up in Australia from Germany?
Yeah, so Felix, my co-founder, he's actually my partner in life, in crime and everything. So during university and after university, we've been living in Australia already before the Ecofin project. At the time, that was 2013 when the idea sparked of the Ecofin, which was it was one of the first projects in the space, and we worked on a fin concept, which is a different project. And then I came up with the idea and said, hey, Felix, why don't we make something out of ocean waste, and why don't we try making fins out of ocean waste? And that was essentially, at the time, there was nothing around. There were no products that were actually aiming at raising awareness at the same time as providing a useful product. We got the opportunity to move to Australia. He was doing a PhD at the time. And I said, okay, that's it. That's the call of the universe. I'm going to do the Ecofin project. Yeah, and we always said very cautious, let's see how we go. We can always drop the project and start something else or just get a normal job. But things kept flowing. It went from really first naive research, desk research. My first trip to Bali was such an eye-opener as well. And somehow things always worked out, and we kept going. And so now the project is still alive, and we have by the time moved back to Germany, and it was a really exciting journey and still alive, and new projects are in the pipeline. So that's really exciting. And we have a new partner on board. I will talk about this later.
Yeah, well, I feel like there's a bunch of questions within what you've just said that need to be unpacked for our listeners. Let's go back to Ecofin. Let's just go back to that. It's a surfboard fin made out of recycled plastic from Bali, right? The actual plastic is from Bali. Is that correct?
Yes. We're using recycled plastic from Bali and islands eastbound of Java, just for the geographic setting. So we're working with a recycling partner in Java because there's no industrial recycling in Bali and eastbound. And that's where we are sourcing the material.
Are you collecting the rubbish? Are the recycling partners doing that?
We are working with partners in Bali. So all the waste from Bali goes into that recycling stream, other islands as well, because, every island has the same problem. So it's hard to say, like, it's only this material, but we can say from the other side, like, all the Bali waste and beach waste that is collected in Bali goes into that recycling stream. And there's no reason not to accept other waste because it doesn't qualify for certain reasons. So we are basically connecting the dots between our partners in Bali, and they are actually providing the rubbish to the recycling facility in Java.
Okay, so let's go back to the fact that you are from Germany. You're moving to Australia. Why Bali rubbish? How did Bali get into the middle of this story?
Yeah, that's where the surfing comes into play. We've been surfing since 10, 15 years, I guess now, or even longer. And the first time I surfed in Bali was about 2006, so very different times. Yeah, of course, like all the traveling, all the rubbish on the beach. And you could see, like, the more I started researching about the problem and seeing the problem, I was more and more concerned, and I got really passionate about the topic. And then the opportunity came up to move to Australia, which is a surfing country, because I think there's quite a challenge to be in the surfing space when you're based in Germany. There are so many surfers in Germany, and Munich has quite an active surfing scene because we have the riverway. Of course, you're not on the ocean, you're not in that, like, lifestyle, etc. And that's what we wanted to do anyway. Like, I was living in France before, so I came from surfing 2 or 3 times every day. Yeah, so that was basically, as I said before, like, it felt like a calling that everything came together, and we did the move to Australia. We have lived before in Australia, so it was an easy landing. We just called our friends, and some even didn't notice that we were gone for 3 years or so, 5. So it felt like, okay, just reactivating our life overseas, and it was just a great start, and things kept rolling. Had the opportunity then to open our little office in Byron Bay, which is, of course, like the mecca of everything eco and surf. So that helped a lot. Now we are back in Germany, which is great too.
I still want to go back to the Bali situation, because I know this probably feels like a long time ago for you. But if you started surfing, I think you said 2006, was that the first time you started surfing in Bali?
Well, I started surfing before, but I surfed in Bali the first time in 2006. Yeah.
In 2006. And I know I've surfed there a couple times. In fact, I was there in September last year. And I know just in the 2 times that I've been, with 2 years apart, that I saw a lot more rubbish in the ocean. Did you see that changing over time as well?
I wouldn't say so, but those observations are, I don't know, I don't want to be too scientific about it, but it's like, it's only momentum pictures that you can take. I find it much more interesting to see, okay, well, how do things change from spot to spot? And you can see, like, in Bali, just because there's so much tourism, it's starting to have, like, a working waste infrastructure or waste management infrastructure. Whereas you go to Lombok, you go to Sumbawa, to Sumba or Sumatra, there's not much going on. And because I'm so deep into that topic and passionate about it, like, I go to see all the landfills and check out the recycling when they, like, say that, yes, we have recycling, and then you go there and there are those piles of plastic bottles, and I ask the locals, how does it work here, etc. So there are so many differences between the islands, because how do you strategically and also physically transport all the waste from A to B? There are boats, but it's a very informal market, etc. So I see that this is such an exciting and difficult space to solve the problem. And I wouldn't get out there and say like, oh, it's much worse in the last 5 years.
What was your background that inspired you to start manufacturing something?
We're actually well equipped, I feel, we have been well equipped for the project. So Felix is a mechanical engineer specializing in product development. And he was working on a biomimicry fin concept. So he was into fluid dynamics and all the composite materials, and he can, do all the CAD drawings, etc. So there's definitely knowledge, which I would say it wouldn't have been possible without that. And I'm, on the other hand, I'm a business and technology graduate. That means I studied business and engineering. So I have also an engineering background, but more to the business side. And also my majors were from university marketing and innovation management. That helped.
Yeah.
So I can understand things. And I previously worked for DC Shoes and Quicksilver in France. So I got into the surfing industry a little bit. I understood a lot about how the market works. And that was also part of the reasons that pushed us to start the project. And it was the phase where it was a bit before this sustainability hype happened and people weren't quite aware of what this all means. I was really frustrated about how things work. I felt like different values in products and how you can actually change things through your becoming an active part of that. And so like, well, I don't have to wait until someone else comes up with the idea. I felt like there was nothing around. So I said, like, okay, why don't we do it ourselves? And yeah.
Well, it sounds like both you and Felix as a team had some great skills. And as you said, you had this background already in surfing and you're in the surf industry, so you understood the market. What was the hardest part of getting your product to market?
Yeah, so funding was definitely a problem, but we did the crowdfunding campaign, so that helped.
Why did you choose a crowdfunding campaign over like getting investors involved?
We thought it's the ideal product for a crowdfunding campaign. We had a story to tell. We created this amazing documentary about the whole project, telling the story. We felt like people were really open to this topic. It was really like just on the brink of becoming a bigger topic of ocean pollution and plastic pollution. So it felt like it's the right moment. It was challenging because in 2015, when we ran the crowdfunding campaign, I felt like crowdfunding was not yet globally so well accepted. So that we had to do lots of education around it. It was like at some stage of the campaign, we made this video explaining how crowdfunding works. Oh, it was horrible.
Because you used Kickstarter too, didn't you?
Just because it was the biggest platform at the time. I think it was a good way, and we learned so much about it, but it was so exhausting to run the Kickstarter campaign. I'm still happy that we went this way. In retrospect, you always have a different perspective, but I would say it was the right way to do it because we've been revolutionary into ways how we initiated the project through the crowdfunding and also the type of product. So I think that aligned well and people understood the story and this kind of work, and it created lots of media buzz around it. Of course, we had through our network in Germany, it was easier in Europe, and we toured whole Australia and Europe with our documentary, organized screenings everywhere. And so we tried to we gave it our all. And I think after those 2 months, I was so exhausted, but then things only started. So it was quite a journey.
Well, it sounds like, though, you would have needed almost a crowdfunding campaign just to fund the crowdfunding marketing.
At the time, that's also interesting. That was all self-funded. We kind of just saved up for that and used all our savings and all the people that supported us from, I edited the campaign. There was lots of self-made. So a friend who was shooting the video for us, she said, it's okay if you pay me much less than my usual day rate would be, and also pay me once you have the money. If you can't get the money, then we make like a super discount, etc. So there was like lots of help and people like investing their own time and resources, and that's why it kind of worked without previous pre-funding of the crowdfunding. But it's very interesting to see, because I'm involved in a new project as well, and we were considering crowdfunding today, and that is something that I found was really, really interesting, the difference between crowdfunding in 2015 and 19. Because today you need an advertising budget of about 20% of the sum that you want to raise to make it work. And you need that upfront. And if you don't have, I don't know, everything is so professional about it. I think all the successful campaigns nowadays, they're all run or made by agencies and super professional. So like the way we used it, and we kind of, it was us talking in the video, and I don't know, like no makeup specialist and no special effects and this and that. It's not common anymore. You know, you look at the polished and super glossy videos today and you're like, okay, well, it's a different game. I think we did a good job, but it's like for today's crowdfunding market, it's definitely not the standard anymore, which is a pity, I find, because the original idea of crowdfunding is, hey, you come up with a good idea, you, I don't know, scrape your funds together to create a half-good video, and then you hope people will love it. And yeah, today it's like, okay, how do I get the budget right to make this massive machine work?
Well, you're right. It used to be really a grass-funded campaign, and that's why the videos were fairly amateur-like, right? You guys were probably way ahead of the curve when you created the documentary, and you're probably part of the blame as well as to why everybody has to lift their game to achieve the same, targets and have to engage professionals now to create these commercials and such. So you could thank yourself for your successful campaign for making it harder for everyone else.
Right? Oh, okay. Yeah. Maybe a little bit.
I do. I've seen that video. I really do think you've raised the bar. So how much money did you actually raise?
$38,000.
And what did that money cover?
Manufacturing, the molding, the material that we sourced from Indonesia, the shipping, etc. And also we did a classic Kickstarter rookie mistake that we offered so many different things, like we had drink bottles and frisbees and T-shirts and all kinds of things, because we thought like, oh, well, we need to offer something for non-surfers as well, just to get those people on board. And then, of course, you do your maths, and then, of course, things change in just the time passing. And so things end up being much more expensive, etc. So this was really difficult to run all these different little projects, from the drinking bottles to this and that. And then we had lots of issues with the currency as well, because everything was displayed in Australian dollars. People look at the prices and say like, oh, that's quite pricey. But everyone here in Germany or Europe didn't instantly see that this was in Australian dollars. And then for them, it felt expensive, but we were actually supposed to put the prices much more up, because the margin was then like for some of our products that we offered was not great, and it barely covered what it was costing us. So there was lots of like complicated situations, and we were like, oh my God, we didn't make anything out of this. And then all the logistics, and how do we get all the stuff over to Europe? And that was such a difficult task. And I was like, Felix was doing his PhD at the time, so I was basically doing all the operations in the background myself, and I was so busy. And I'm quite an organized person, but you can imagine like having 5 types of projects running at the same time, and then packaging design and this and that. And the crowdfunding money helped to kick things off, but all the rest is self-funded, and it was never enough to pay for all what it needed to get off the ground. But it was a good starting point, and that helped a lot. And also that we created the community around it and the buzz around it, so we didn't have to start from zero with building an audience and having just people liking our brand, or definitely just creating that brand and identity out in the ether.
Well, let's talk about that further, because you hear a lot about crowdfunding, or successful crowdfunding campaigns, where they get a great start, they're able to start their project, but then the sales die off after that. They don't maintain the momentum. How did you continue to sell product after you've kind of gone through that buzz? You finally have more products to offer because you've created the mold for your fin. How did you keep things going?
I think if we had the resources, I think we would have done much more in this space. I think we just kept going with getting the word out on social media. That was all that was possible in terms of resources and money. And I think we were just lucky that it was not yet in this super professional space, and that we could, we had a story to tell, and it was engaging for the people, that they kind of stayed on board and were following what we were doing, and with all the education projects that we were doing. So there was always a lot of noise just happening naturally. And then after we had our product ready for the market, I went on sales trips, went to visit every surf shop in Australia, not every surf shop, but a few shops in Australia, went to Indonesia, and then, I don't know, people knew about the product, so the online sales kept coming in. But, we have to be, to level this out, it's not huge what we made, yeah? We sold off our product, and now we're actually almost out of stock for the first production run. So we're going into production towards October, hopefully, for the next production run. So it's not a massive machinery where you say okay, well, we pump out so much stock. It's a small project.
If you had the Kickstarter campaign in 2015, it's 2019 now, and now you're just finally getting to the end of your stock from that. This must be a project of love then. It's more of a side hustle. What do you guys normally do for a living now?
I'm involved in a new startup. We're doing a training device for golf and other sports. So I stayed in the sports area, and also same thing again, developing product from the scratch. And Felix is actually the consulting job now.
Ah, okay. So a little bit of at least a normal paycheck to help fund your other projects. It's great, though, that this project is still going on, and especially because you guys are now in Germany. You tried to tell me before about Max, and I think this is a great time to chat about him further, because since you've gone back to Germany, Felix has a job, you're working full-time at the moment. Tell us about how Five Oceans is continuing without you being present here in Australia.
It was a very difficult time with the transition back to Germany. We're not sure what to do with it. As I mentioned in the beginning, we always said we keep it in the flow in the beginning, and let's see how far we go. And then, of course, we went that far that we've been basically a global brand with sales all over the world. Not huge, but everyone knew that we were out there. And then it was a time that we started to transition back to Germany and spend some time in Indonesia. And I was not finding a solution in my head. I was literally sitting there I don't know what to do. I feel like I need something else now after 4 years of really intense time with Five Oceans, but seemed like it didn't want to die, like a little flower or like a tree that you didn't water it, but it kept on growing and things were sitting there. And I was like, okay, well then if I cannot find a solution at the moment, maybe I need to let it sit and hover, which was, I think, risky just because how social media works nowadays, when you keep things quiet, people tend to look away, find new things they're engaged with. But things kept on coming in. I had like new shops in the US and left and right, and we have a depot and a little logistics infrastructure here in Germany as well. So I could handle lots of things from Germany, and I did that on the sidelines of my new project. And I was like, well, okay, if it's that for the moment, it's that, and I can't change anything about it. And then suddenly Max got in touch with us. He's German too. It's funny, but yeah, we're not an exclusively German project, but it seemed to happen that way. And Max got in touch, and I get lots of requests from people who want to be involved, who want to do an internship, literally like a few emails per week on that space. But Max's email was a bit different. I could instantly see like, oh, he's different and he has a different spark. And also he was a bit like more professional about it. And then we started talking, and I was like, okay, well, interesting. Let's have a call. And then he told me what he's doing, and that he actually found us because he had the same idea. And then he found us, and he said, like, well, instead of reinventing the wheel, I might just get in touch and see what those guys are up to. And then I was like, ooh, okay, well, what do you have in mind? What do you want to do? And he was like, well, I could imagine like to get involved in some way. And we started talking more. And then it was, I think, last year before Christmas, he came to Munich and we met in person. And the conversation was flowing instantly, and it was like super good vibes. And then by the end of the first conversation we had in person, he already said like, yes, I want to move to Byron Bay and I got to do this and that. We're like, okay, well, you're our man.
Wow. Well, I mean, that's amazing too, because obviously if the company doesn't sound like it's bringing in a lot of revenue, with Max coming on board, there probably wasn't enough for even a full salary, perhaps. Is that true?
At the moment, not. But he also came in with lots of new ideas and also making things bigger and expanding the product range, etc. So I think this is the plan. I mean, in business, you never know if the plan works out. But it's the plan that it grows definitely from this always being a side hustle to fully working company that brings in enough money to fund at least one or two people working for the company and having freelancers supporting from the sidelines. And yeah, that's the mission. And I think we're on a good way. And let's see what happens in the next year. I'm really excited.
As you're moving forward, are you still really focused on the recycled plastic story? As an example, I know that you've created a special composite to make these surfboard fins, and I just wondered if people are still buying the product because of the recycled factor, or if they're just buying it because it's a great fin.
No, I think it's the story that impresses people and also gets their attention, and then that it's a good product. And we're like, one of our major reasons or major qualities, I think, is that we've always been very transparent about where things come from, what we're doing, that things are like, that there's a certain content of recycled material in it. But we decided for our brand, what 5 Ocean stands for, is a transparent, approachable brand that makes products that consumers can understand, they can research about it, and when they're convinced that they want to support this cause and are convinced that this is a good product, I think that's where we get our customers from.
Okay, so let's talk about the future, Luise, because I know you guys are about to relaunch your website and you might have some other projects or products in the works. Do you want to tell us about that?
What I can tell is, yes, the website is in relaunch. Max is doing a great job refreshing the brand and having a bit of a new appearance, which I think is a great way to relaunch things. We're going into a new production round, which will be towards the end of the year. So this will be an Ecofin for future systems, because we have this is the most request that we have most of the time, apart from doing other colors, etc. That was basically, everyone was like, okay, well, when do you bring out future fins? And we're doing this now. So
just to be clear for some of our listeners that aren't familiar with surfing, can you explain what a future fin is?
It's just the different system, how the fin is connected to the board. There are 2 different systems out in the market, or 3. And we went for FCS, which has double plugs that you screw the fins on. And the other system has just one long plug for non-surfers to understand it. And it's much more stable as well. We're going for this now, but we're also working on other products from recycled material, from the same material. And we're also working on some apparel and just products that are in the same base, that fit well
in surfing,
and that have the same values and are not unnecessary. Because that's something that is also really important for us when you're intending not to produce things that you wouldn't really need, because I think part of the solution to our problems in the world is also being more conscious about what you consume and how much you really need. And sometimes just don't produce any waste at all is the best option, and to avoid unnecessary things.
What kind of impact would you like to make with the company ultimately?
I think, of course, using recycled material, trying to, on the sourcing side of things, I would love to connect the dots even more and connect with more areas where we source our material. We're at the moment trialing things in Fiji, which is a super exciting project. The world will hear about this much more in the future. So there we're going into a long-term partnership with the Fiji surf team and working on different options, how to transform the waste, partly already locally on site and then partly in Australia. So I would love, that's my definitely passion area for the whole project, is the sourcing, the waste management and infrastructure. So that's my goal, is to get much deeper into that and to bring the waste closer to the product, even in terms of storytelling, but also in terms of distances traveled. Let's say that, because we're working on a sustainable product, so we have to keep a close eye on our carbon footprint as well. And so this is one field that has always been super important for us, and this requires funds as well, that you can work on that and trial things, just also in terms of traveling and putting more effort into that. On the other hand, the education part was also always a big part of Five Oceans. We ran lots of projects in schools in Australia, but also Indonesia, and this actually inspired me to move ahead and actually work as a university lecturer as well, part-time in Germany, because I loved it so much to see those young people be inspired by the project. And 2 of my favorite projects were the school project with a secondary school in Australia, where we produced the fin keys and we took the kids on a mini version of our supply chain. So we did a beach cleanup in south of Brisbane, and they learned about the waste, and it was so amazing. By the end of the whole term, I went in every week or every second week, I went into class and we did a little other part of the project. And by the end of the term, all the kids were when I asked them about their plans for the future and what they want to be professionally, and everyone was it didn't matter whether they were more in the technical side or marketing, but everyone said, I want to do this and this, but it needs to be sustainable, or it needs to be in the environmentally friendly. And I felt like this topic just popped up in their minds as oh my God, that's the future. And I feel like the younger generation is so ambitious about that. You can see that with all the Fridays for Future movement now, and climate change, and how the young generation is actually telling the old incumbents in our society, they're you have to change your thinking, you have to change your attitude, it's time to do something. And that was one of the most amazing parts of our work.
I think that video's on YouTube, isn't it? Where you're teaching the kids how to make keys?
Yes, it's on our website, but also on YouTube. One thing to add to the impact question is also what we always thought is the most important part of our work is raising awareness. And I mean, I wouldn't claim the whole, like switch in the heads of like millions of people to Five Oceans activity. But in the surf space, we were definitely the first ones to do a project like this. And now all the brands they attempt to have sustainable products. They attempt to revolutionize or change the way how they produce things. And I think we kind of were definitely part of this momentum that was needed to get something going in this really, really slow industry. It's interesting, like you would see like the mindset of a surfer, and then you have this really slow and innovation averse culture in the industry. And I think it was great to be in that space during those times. And people were like, oh my God, you're so right. We need to change what we use in the surfing space, because I mean, it's all resin and fiberglass and EPS foam and PU foam, and it's really not sustainable. And then great projects started to raise from our friends at No Talks, for example. They're doing great surfboards in a sustainable way. And we connected with so many shapers that are now using recycled blanks and using flax fiber, so natural fiber instead of glass fiber. And so I think, the awareness on the both producers or brand side and also on the consumer side is one of the biggest impacts that we can do, and where I see lots of potential actually to change things, because we cannot change the world at once. But I think for one step at a time, like you won't buy an Ecofin and then throw your rubbish somewhere without thinking about it. I think once you stepped into that field, you become a much more conscious consumer in any aspect.
Yeah, good point. And it sounds like, Luise, I asked you about your future impact, but it sounds like you've already done an amazing job, both in the education space as well as changing the industry in some degree to look at the way that they make their own products. And it sounds like you also have some great things coming up that will continue to test the sustainability factor of surfing products, or something to do, I suppose, with water. I'm not quite sure what you're doing yet, but we can't wait to hear about the launch. Okay, how else can people find out more about you and your business, Luise?
Instagram, of course. I think we are on all channels. We are called Join Five Oceans. We've got a YouTube channel. And I think the most regularly updated channel at the moment is Instagram. But also we've got a Facebook page. And I think there will be lots of new things coming through our social media channels in the next weeks. We have a great support from the Sidelines as well for the social media. So I'm not 100% involved anymore in this, but they're doing a great job preparing everything, also in terms of the Fiji project. Lots of interesting news coming out in the next months.
I'll put some of your links onto our show notes so that people can find you. And when you're ready to launch, let us know. We'll add that to the show notes as well. Thank you, Luise, for everything you guys are doing over at Five Oceans. Just by making products out of recycled plastic, there's a place for those materials to go in the first place. But obviously that educational component is huge. And we need more people like you and Felix and Max helping this process. So thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for the work that you guys are doing.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for joining me today on this podcast. If you want to see the links or to review any information we spoke about today, then check out our show notes on this channel or on our website, plasticsrevolution.com. If you found anything interesting or helpful at all, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to our show and to tell others. Stay tuned next week as I chat to another innovator, changemaker, or fellow entrepreneur who is leading the plastics revolution. This is Tammy Dange. Be kind to animals and Mother Nature.